secretly announcing independence in there, and it really was supposed to be a secret, the Jewish people were congregated out here because it really wasn't a secret. It was a secret that got passed and people knew about it, and the excitement and the electricity was in the air. I don't know if you can understand. You come from a country, all of you are here from America?
No, Canada.
And Canada.
Canada, okay, I was once Canadian too. You come from a place where sovereignty is a given. You take it for granted. If your ancestors came from a place where you were persecuted, you came to the land of the free and the home of the brave, or Canada.
Yeah.
If you came to America to be persecuted, then that was basically supposed to be over with the war to free the slaves. The idea of America is the land of the free, the home of the brave, and the people living there feel that they have a right to demand rights. They have a right to demand citizenship and everything due them with that citizenship. And it seems to be limitless. What you have to understand is the Jewish people for 2,000 years had no such rights, had no such expectations, realistic expectations, in the lands in which they lived in exile from this place. The only place where we felt that we would have the absolute right to sovereignty was based on a memory, not something new that we were coming to, but what we remembered. And we remembered it in a book that we read over and over and over again all the time, every week. Same book, every single year for thousands of years. We spent our time reading the book, understanding the book, and thinking up new ideas for how to interpret the book. Never, ever forgot it was the dream. Jews began coming back to this land. Actually, no, that's not true. Jews never completely left. There was always a Jewish presence in Israel. You will go past, I'm sure, I don't know if you'll go in, a town called Pke'ina in the north.
In the Galilee area.
In the yes. There were a bunch of priests in the destruction of the temple, grabbed all of their stuff, grabbed their families, 7 families of priests, went north and settled in the land of Pke'ina and basically never left. There was always a Jewish presence here. Most of us were in exile, persecuted, hunted. Sometimes things were okay, and then they went back to being hunted and persecuted. Mainly, things were the worst in Christian countries, in countries where Christianity was prevalent. They were pretty bad in Muslim countries too, on and off, somewhat less. We dreamed of returning. We dreamed of the temple. We never forgot. It's crazy. We read in our synagogues how many feet the temple had to be, how big it had to be, when to sacrifice there. They'd never seen the temple. A sacrifice? Who does such things? And yet we read about it, such and such cubic feet. It makes no sense unless you're a people intending to return.
Wow.
So Jews, all of a sudden, there was a Zionist movement. The dream of Zion was always there. The Zionist movement said, you know what? We're not waiting anymore for the Messiah to come. That's it. Let's go. And they came. And what they found was amazing. The land of milk and honey, not. It was barren. It was sand. It was rocks. Nothing grew here, maybe a few olive trees. So terrible. So along come a people, Jewish people, who had been not allowed to farm and work the land for about 1,500 years. We found the people who knew the least in the world about agriculture, farming, and making a desert bloom. Look. Look. Nobody knew less about this stuff than we did. Nobody. Now, even cynics like me have to see the hand of God in this. For 2,000 years, people who this was not their land couldn't make anything grow. Then come the people whose land this is, who knew nothing about making things grow, and all of a sudden things are growing.
Listen to this. Because your land will grow. Your land.
Your land will grow. And look at it. It's unbelievable. And not only that, we're exporting agricultural knowledge to the rest of the world. Really, I have to laugh.
Right.
We are the main exporters of agricultural know-how to Africa, even to America. There's
China. I'm guiding in China, in Thailand, all their agriculture based on the system, the methods of the agriculture that taught by Israel. Wow. We have advisors
Croatia
there.
comes here too.
Yeah,
Croatia.
everybody, American farm, everybody. We invented drip irrigation. I mean, really. I feel funny even saying it, but that's what happened.
Cherry tomatoes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the cherry tomatoes.
No problem. Glad to be of help. Really, these are the things that you have to understand about us, about who we are. So we come back, we start to make the desert bloom. We are not exactly welcomed with open arms. Even though we're making the desert bloom, there's an ambivalence. On the one hand, what are you doing here? This is not yours. On the other hand, yeah, it is. Look what they're doing. The British were here. They weren't too thrilled either. But the Jews started to come. The first wave of immigration, the second wave of immigration, the third wave of immigration. And the idea began to take hold. Maybe we could be a sovereign state. The more we thought we could be a sovereign state, the more difficult things became. The British fought it tooth and nail. After the Holocaust, the British knew exactly who those people were. They liberated camps. They knew who those people were. They knew that no one had taken Jews in before the Holocaust. By the way, the only country to say it would give visas to Jews was the Dominican Republic, and that was on condition that no Jews come. But at least with a valid visa, you could go somewhere else. There were some Jews who managed to get that visa, who managed to go. We're talking about tens, where millions died. After the war, after the Shoah, after the Holocaust, the remnant wanted to come home. They wanted to come to Israel. The British weren't letting them in. They knew who these people were. My parents were among them, survivors of Auschwitz. Lost their entire families, I sound like, they were in a mall and they just sort of wandered off. A few of them starved to death. Others were gassed in the gas chambers and then cremated. Their families were slaughtered, and then the British weren't letting them in here, the only place they wanted to go. Weren't letting them in. There were Jews who wanted, after the Holocaust, you don't know what happened to your family. You want to go home, and there's a reason for me saying this today. They wanted to go home. it wasn't home anymore, but if you get lost and you lose your family and you can't find them, where do you go? You go home, because that's where everybody's going to congregate and meet. My father was from a town called Kielce in Poland. My father said to me a statement I'll never forget. He said, "Thank God I knew everyone was dead. I had no reason to go back." Because in 1946, in August 1946, there were Jews who didn't know everyone was dead, and they went to Kielce to look for families, and the Poles slaughtered 26 Jews who had the temerity to want to come back and maybe ask for their homes back. 26 survivors were slaughtered by the Poles. So the British weren't letting the Jews in. They couldn't really wander around Poland, and yet they wanted to come in. They wanted to get here. They came on illegal ships. The British sent them away to Cyprus, and they were yet in more camps. Our leader, the head of the Jewish agency, there wasn't a government, said, "I'm going to declare a state of Israel." The Americans said, "You're out of your mind. You're going to be invaded. You have maybe 500,000 Jews here. Most of them have just come from being starved and slaughtered for years. You have no weapons. You have nothing. Don't do it." It made no sense. Everybody, Russia, everybody was saying, "Do not do it." Little Ben-Gurion, about 5 feet tall, said, I'm not going to use the words, but go jump off a bridge. I'm doing it. He sent out invitations, and all of the invitations said, "Secret. Do not tell anybody." We're doing this in Dizengoff's house at 4 in the afternoon, just before Shabbat. Sorry, why not in Jerusalem? Because Jerusalem was besieged, was harder to get to. This is where we're doing it. Tell nobody. All right, so about, I don't know how many thousands of people were out here when the people who were active in the Jewish agency turned up here. Everybody said, "Don't do it." The Arab countries, 7 of them, declared war on Israel before he hit the gavel announcing the state of Israel was declared. And he did it. I don't know where he got the temerity, where he got the chutzpah. It's the only word for it. Actually,
the courage.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Actually, yes, I do.
Yeah.
One of my fears is, had I been there, I would not have had that temerity. It made no sense. And they attacked us. And yet in there, he declared the state of Israel. And we became a sovereign nation. And most of the Jews believed that if we were going to die, we had a right to die defending our land, our place, where no one could tell us, "Get out," where no one could tell us, "You believe this, you believe that, or we'll kill you." This was going to be our land, and for the first time in almost 2,000 years, we were going to be a sovereign nation with everything that implies. Everything. Why did I tell you the story about the slaughter of Jews after the Holocaust in Kielce by Poles? Because I'm really angry today. Sorry. And I'm sorry if your feelings are hurt. But my mother, who survived the ghetto, she was on the last transport of the last ghetto out to Auschwitz. My mother and my father were slaves for 6 years. I've had many conversations with African American friends, and I said to them, "Do you know what the difference between our slavery, that one, I'm not talking about the one with the Egyptians, do you know what the difference between our slavery and the slavery of Black who became Americans was, as bad as what was done to African Americans was, they had value. They had value. They were bought, they were sold. It's terrible to buy and sell a human being, but they had value. The slave owners had no interest in them dying because they had value. They were there for a reason. They were doing work. They were there for a reason. My parents had no value. The purpose of enslaving them was working them to death. They did things that made no sense. My father hauled boulders from one place to another on about 200 calories a day, and then he hauled them right back again. There was no sense to the labor except to have them die. It was another way to have Jews die. My mother grew up in Poland, and she dreamed of this place. She dreamed way before it happened of being in the land of Israel and maybe one day being a citizen of the state of Israel, of the Jewish state of Israel. My mother had two lines. You could see she once had pierced ears, and she had a line here and a line here. And I said, how do you get those lines? Because I wanted to be like my mother. How do you get those lines? And she told me that when she was a little girl, my mother excelled in mathematics, so her father sent her to a regular Polish school. Lived in Poland in a very big city called Lodz. And every time the teacher asked a question, she raised her hand, and she was the only one who knew the answers. And there were two problems. She was a Jew and she was a girl. And all the rest were just sitting there. And he asked a question, she raised her hand, and she was always right. And he screamed at her, and I'm really sorry, but this was the truth, and this was the truth of her life. He said, "Christ killer, shut up." So she did. She was a little girl. She was, I think, in the 3rd grade. She shut up. And by the way, I was also called a Christ killer when I was a little girl in Canada. It was prevalent. It happened. She put her hand down. And then he asked a question, and no one's hand went up. And then he started shrieking at her, "Answer the question! Answer the question!" Now, it was traditional in the Jewish community. My parents were ultra-Orthodox or religious, to have your ears pierced when you were a baby. There was no specific day, but newborn. And so she had earrings. And he was so incensed and yelling and telling the class that she had killed Jesus, and this was a representative. He grabbed her ears with both hands, and he yanked the earrings, and that's why she had the two lines.
Oh my God.
Our one prime minister, Yitzhak Shamir, said that Poles imbibed, I'm translating, imbibed anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews in their mother's milk. One of our ministers quoted that yesterday in a conference in Poland. And Poland will not have anything to do with us because he told it, what do you call it in America? Truth to power? And they didn't like it. We're a sovereign nation. I believe that what this means is that we need to speak our truth to power. I don't think there is our truth. There's truth. Truth to power. That's what this moment means. We're standing outside like they did to witness an unbelievable moment, that could only be from God. Only. There's no other explanation. It makes no sense. And this was the moment. And that's what this place means to us. And this is the embodiment of that. This moment where we say we're back, we're home, this is who we are, these are our morals, these are our ethics, this is God's plan for us. This is God's plan. And we see it all the time. We see it in every tree that grows. We see it in every war we win. We see it in these people running around. She's yelling at her dogs in Hebrew. Nobody in the world speaks a language from 3,000 years ago. I asked some Chinese people that I was speaking to, who are one of the most ancient peoples I know. Can you read a manuscript from 3,000 years ago? They said no. We're the only people who can. We're the only people who were dispersed all over the world, spoke every other language, and yet still speak our own. And we've got, can you imagine anybody speaking Latin?
Yeah.
Well, I think some priests do. Exactly. Amare, I learned Latin.
Yeah.
We're the only, the Romans stayed where they are, became the Italians, don't speak a word of Latin. We were dispersed all over. We came back, and the Hebrew language was survived because we knew it from reading that manuscript, the Torah. We're the same people. We remain the same people. In returning to the land, this is the rebirth. The state of Israel was not born here. It was reborn here. It was reborn. And that's what's important for me to understand. The importance of this moment, of this place, and this place. In who we are, because it's different from any other people. And I would imagine that a people who weren't disenfranchised for so long would have a problem understanding it. But if you don't get that, you don't get this place. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to stay here for the rest of the day because I can't get down.
And we pray for your wrist.